The first time I was in the OR, I fainted. I'm like, this is crazy. You're under lights and you got scrubs on, gown, and it's hot. To take a knife and cut somebody open is, you know, if you weren't in the hospital and did that, you'd be in jail.
You're telling me you fainted in the OR in Arkansas, but you went on to serve in one of the biggest battles in American history. Hello, everyone. It's Andrew Demani. Welcome back to Permission to Shine, where I get to highlight the most interesting, inspiring leaders from across the world. Today, we've got a hero. Dr. John Holcomb was one of 3 trauma surgeons that operated for over 30 hours straight in the famous Black Hawk Down battle in 1993. You've seen it in movies, you've read the books. I recently watched the 3-episode Netflix series on it. So good. Check it out if you haven't. And I was like, it's cool that the soldiers are getting highlighted, but who was behind the scenes doing a lot of work that's not being discussed? And so I went on this years-long journey of tracking down Dr. John Holcomb, finally got the opportunity to talk to him, and couldn't be more excited to bring it to you guys. He's dedicating his life to getting pre-hospital blood, as he calls it, because it's important. He's also taken 5 trips to Ukraine since the war broke out. This guy is as humble as it gets. He is an American hero. He never does interviews. You're going to see how humble and low key he is. So let's get into it. Enjoy it. If you've got feedback for me, as always, Andrew at permissiontoshine.org. I love y'all. Thank you for being here. Let's get into it with Dr. John Holcomb. How would you explain who you are and what you've done in under 60 seconds?
My dad was in the Army. I joined the Army because I had no money for medical school, and then finished surgery residency in the Army and got a call from a buddy of mine to join the Joint Special Operations Command, which I did for a decade. And then I became a civilian trauma surgeon after 23 years in the Army, and now I'm partially retired.
I'm trying to understand where this desire for service comes from. That's, to be candid, that's one of my goals, to learn about you, because you are a man of service. You're exceedingly humble. I've had the opportunity to get to know you over 6 months, and it takes you a minute to warm up. You don't want the attention about Dr. John Holcomb, but you are a man of service, and I'm just really curious where that comes from.
Well, I guess, I don't know, my family, right? My dad was in the Army, and you kind of grow up with that ethos. And then I joined the Army, frankly, because I had no money. It wasn't a big call to service.
Necessity.
Yeah, it was necessity to pay for medical school and residency. And then you start taking care of soldiers and their families, and one thing leads to the other, and all of a sudden you can't think that there's nothing you'd rather do than take care of the soldiers and their families in the deployed setting and back home.
Where'd you grow up?
Like I said, my dad was in the Army, so I was born in Fort Benning, Georgia, lived there 6 months, went to Germany. We went over on a boat, actually, in 1960, and then came home on an airplane, but lived in Germany, Thailand, Virginia, Tennessee, Arkansas, all throughout the South, plus around the world.
I would imagine that made making friends quite difficult. Did you at least have some siblings to hang out with you?
So my brother's 5 years younger, which, when you're a kid, is a long way. He couldn't really play basketball with us, when we were playing sports. I don't have the friends that my son has and my daughter, where they have gone from second grade onwards with their friends. Flip side is I'm pretty comfortable moving around the world and have, people I know all around the world.
What's it like being at home then?
It's an interesting question. Where is home, right? So where's home? Like, which home are you talking about?
You tell me, John.
Yeah, right now, we have a small apartment in Houston, Texas. My wife is still working full time, but we have 31 acres outside of Houston, about 90 miles outside. I would consider that home. I like sitting on the porch, drinking coffee, listening to the birds. Have a bird out that allows me to say what I listen with my phone, and it tells me what birds are singing. So that's pretty cool.
I only do that for songs like Shazam or whatever,
It's the same thing. I don't have
got
Shazam, but I have the Merlin bird app. It's phenomenal.
You got the cooler version going.
Yeah.
We need to get caught up. So you think of home as the ranch, the 31 acres
Yeah.
outside of Houston.
Yeah, that's where I'll be tomorrow morning.
And you're fine sitting at home chilling.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I enjoy that tremendously, and I'm not sure I'd want to be there all the time because I still do a fair amount of work in different places. I guess I have an element of ADD, although that was never diagnosed. Um, I would get bored if I only did one thing. I would get bored right now if I was out there full time. There's stuff to do. I got a chainsaw and I got a big mower and I have a Polaris and um, there's stuff to do on the ranch. You can always cut branches and cut the grass. And, it doesn't need to be manicured like the house we had in the suburbs, but there's always work to do out there. Plus, we have good friends. We drink good bourbon, we drink good wine, we eat good food, and we play good cards, and we ride bikes.
Hey, you impress me because I think people who have this global trotting life, it's really hard for them to be at home and to do nothing. But it seems like you've found a decent balance of both.
Yeah, I think yes, I would say that I didn't do that for a long time. I think it is somewhat centering and gives me time to think. When I'm out riding the riding lawnmower, nobody bothers me. I don't have headphones in. Can't really be much. It really allows you to think about stuff.
It does. I think getting to boredom is important. I achieved that. We've talked about Thailand. We've bonded over Thailand. I was in Thailand for maybe 3 weeks. It was the first time I can remember hitting boredom in a decade. And hitting boredom, I think, is so powerful. Like you tap into this creativity.
Yeah, I've dreamed up good ideas for projects, projects to write or projects to create or projects to work with other people while doing that.
Mm.
I'm not sure boredom is the right answer, but unassaulted by your phone, by the computer, by TV, whatever. Unassaulted.
Unassaulted is a great word.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of visualize being assaulted by data streams, right? And the data streams can be just about anything. But to get out and have those data streams pointed at your head is kind of nice.
One of the reasons I like sought you hard, like getting you on the podcast, man. I hope you know how much this means to me because I was watching the 3-part series Black Hawk Down that came out this year in 2025. And it was great. We've all seen the movie, and then they released this 3-part series, and there was a lot of intimate interviews with the soldiers, people who were actually there in the 1993 battle in Somalia. And while it was amazing to hear from the heroes and the soldiers, I was like, man, there's people who were involved in this, right? Who saved a lot of lives that aren't being highlighted. Who are those people? And I went on a rabbit hole, right? Who were the surgeons that helped save lives? And who did I come to find out about? Dr. John Holcomb. And so to be sitting here talking to you is an honor. And I want to back up and go to 1993 if you'd allow me to.
Sure. Yeah, there were three surgeons. I was one of three, right? So Tony Canfield and Johnny Hartchek were the other two surgeons.
Wow.
Just to be clear
Well,
about that.
yeah. Well, thank you to all three of you. And to me, it's kind of mind blowing that there was only three. There was three of you that had to deal with a catastrophe. How did you get there? How did you get to Somalia in 1993? Walk us through that.
Number one, there wasn't a plan. Military paid for my medical school. I did my general surgery residency in El Paso, Texas, with Johnny Horchak, orthopedic surgeon, and Tony Canfield, another general surgeon, by the way. So we all knew each other. And then a buddy of mine, when I was a senior resident, called up and said, "Hey, I got this job at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. It's pretty good." He said, "What is it?" I said, "What is it?" He goes, "Well, I really can't tell you." But it's good. And I know Steve Jones for a long time. He was a year or two ahead of me in training. And yeah, that was good enough. He said it was good. I trusted Steve, so I went there. And it turned out to be a great job in the hospital at Womack Army Medical Center at Fort Bragg because I had to operate a bunch, which is good. That's what surgeons like to do. We like to operate. And then I also got to deploy, 3 or 4 months out of the year with a Joint Special Operations Command, which was the real job I was talking about. And, the JSOC is really the best soldiers in the world. They go off and do, difficult missions all around the world. And I was able to join the medical unit that provided support for them. I did that for about a year and a half. And my obligation at that point was 3 years, so I was a year and a half done, and I had planned I was gonna get out of the Army. I had interviewed in Farmington, New Mexico, which at that time was 20,000 people, and I was gonna be a small town general surgeon. I had a contract in hand, actually. In our world, if you interview twice, that means you're done, and they want you. They sent you a contract, and you sign. And I'd actually kind of picked out a notional plot of ground to build a house, so I was really close. And then called up and said, "You're going to Somalia," and then the big event, mass casualty happened. I just had to stay in the Army. So
Wow.
yeah, life changing for a lot of people.
How long were you in Somalia before the big event happened?
A couple of weeks. I don't know. I haven't done the whole history. I had a hernia repair, like 3 or 4. I fixed all myself 3 or 4 days before I deployed. Done by Tony Baskin. Did it laparoscopically, which in 1993 with a scope was kind of unusual. So I was able to get on and deploy and then run a couple miles when we landed. And yeah, we had, what's not in a lot of the movies and the stories is there were multiple casualties before the big Mescal and multiple operations by the operators to take down Muhammad Faradid's infrastructure. And so we had lots of opportunities to work out the kinks and make sure we had the right logistics and the right supplies before the big Mescal happened. So a couple weeks.
And how were you feeling about being in Somalia?
Well, when you're a young Army guy and sent around to go around the world and do crazy things, it's pretty awesome, actually. So, I mean, that's what you sign up for, right?
Hmm.
Um, when you join those units, you don't sign up to stay in the hospital or stay stateside. You sign up to go around the world
Yeah.
and do stuff.
For JSOC, is that something that you applied for? You're like, hey, I want to, that's the most badass group to be a part of. I want to be a part of that.
It was not really. There's no like website, remember, to apply online. That the
We
it's
don't
one
have
of
a
these.
website to plug for people.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way. You get called by a buddy who says, "Hey, you need to. This is probably the right thing for you," and then they do an evaluation assessment, and um, you have to, for the medical unit, the correct criteria today, even today, is to be really good at what you do medically. Um, Obviously, you have to be physically and mentally fit. Um, you don't want to slow down the shooters, like the guys who do the actual operations, but you don't want to get in their way and slow them down. At the same time, you're not the guy knocking down the doors. Right? You're the medical folks that take care of whoever gets hurt.
I'm sure there was a lot of people that wanted to be chosen to be part of JSOC. Why do you think you were uniquely picked?
Well, like it's kind of I don't know if it's maybe inappropriate phrase, but it's an old boy network on the medical side. Yeah, you get referred in, and then you have to prove yourself. But it's a referral in. Right? So nobody really knows if you're good at what you do medically unless you really worked with people. And like I said, Steve Jones called me up and said, "Hey, you want to do this?" I've known Steve a long time, and people that did the same thing to him, and Chip Hetzer did the same thing to Steve, and Steve Hadstedesh, and I knew those guys, and yeah, it just seemed like the thing to do. Again,
Hmm.
it wasn't a grand plan.
It just
You know,
happens.
it just happened. I mean, it's just people call you up and go, "Hey, you want to go to Thailand?" And you said yes, right? Or Tibet, or where, I mean, things just happen.
Yeah, but you were open to them and you said yes. And also you were a badass surgeon.
So, my dad gave me advice, and I've now given this advice many times that in the military, at least, when they ask for volunteers, raise your hand. Right? Don't run away from the opportunities. Raise your hand when somebody says, "Hey, we need volunteers for it." Raise your hand, and then doesn't care what it is. In the military, you can stay at medical. You can stay in the hospital if you want to, but the military is really about the hospital and the military part. Getting out in the field with the soldiers,
Hmm.
and I always, I mean, I love it. So yeah, to me, I had the best of both worlds. I could operate on patients in the hospital, take care of them, do all the operations, cancer, hernias, whatever, and then go out in the field and do all the Army stuff. So, I mean, it was great.
Help us understand 1993. That, like, you wake up the morning of the big battle. Help me feel like I'm there.
We started off that morning of October 3rd, 1993. A little Somali girl had a crash with an army or a military armored personnel carrier and broke her face all up. And so we were actually operating on a little girl that morning with the orthopedic surgeon, Johnny Horchak, putting an external fixture on her jaw, which neither one of us had done before. And so we figured that out. The next casualties that came in were guys that ran a Jeep, and I forget one of the young soldiers that got hit by a mine, and he had part of his pen in his pocket, and part of the pen was in his leg because of the mine blast. And we got that out. They were okay, and then the big mass cal happened, and it just became a blur after that. Honestly, for the next 2 days. But what was amazing? People talk about the surgeons, but the whole combat support hospital. I mean, just were magnificent. The nurses and the techs and everybody. I mean, it was pretty amazing effort by everybody.
Can you kind of summarize big picture what happened during that mass casualty?
You know, in those kind of events, you become there's all the operational stuff that the movies and the books are about. From the hospital point of view, we got casualties in multiple waves, and so there's triage of patients, outside the hospital, right outside. The sick people need to come in through the front door. The walking wounded go around the side. And then in the ER, you triage again, patients going to the CAT scan. We had a CAT scanner, have patients going to the operating room. And so there's sick people in the ER, but then you triage again and figure out who's going to go to the operating room. We had 3 OR tables and running, and then, back in the ICU as well. And so you're running back and forth from the OR to the ICU to the ER. And the other people are taking care of the minimally injured, the walking wounded on the floors. But it in and the people bringing food and water, and because they just kept to keep going, right? You just keep going, you just keep operating, and one after the other. My memory is running from the OR to the ICU to the ER, in between that little circle, and then occasionally when things slowed down, going to the wards, not the floor, but the wards where the minimally injured guys were, and looking at them and seeing if any of those guys need to go to the operating, which they did. They weren't; those patients were not dying or at risk of dying, but they need to go to the operating room and had injuries.
Are these people that you recognize and know?
Yeah, these were not all of them, but a lot of them were folks that I had deployed with for the previous year and a half. In these units, the special units, the Joint Special Operations Command units that were called Tier 1 units. You do exercises really frequently. And so many of the folks I knew pretty well. Some of them I knew really well. Yeah.
What does that do to your ability to do your job with them? Does that change anything for you?
What you have to do when you take care of patients that are really injured is, and I kind of do this mentally, kind of do a little mental game with yourself, is that when I back away and look at patients, um, I I become much more. It sounds kind of harsh, but you let those human emotions and feelings surface. When I'm approach the table and touch the patient, it's necessary to become a little bit less emotional. Um, and so when I back away, even today, you think, man, this has really got to hurt, or what's going on in there? What are they thinking? But as you approach the table and get closer to the patient, and you become, look, we need to go to the OR, we need to do this, these things, bing, 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 bing. And that to me that may be a survival technique. That may be a way that you don't want those emotions to disappear. People talk about it. You don't want those emotions to disappear. You want them to be there, but you can't let them get in the way of caring for the patient. And so I visualize it's a matter of feet, actually. Um, backing away and then moving forward. So that's what I do.
John, that's fascinating. I mean, I I worked in the OR with Medtronic, and I'd always think about that. We would get in the room. A lot of it was cancer patients. They'd open them up from basically the throat to the belly button, kind of a nasty opening. They get in there and you find 12 tumors that you didn't know about.
Right.
And I would be like kind of gasped, right? I'm like, oh shit, I'm 22, right? I'm young, but the surgeon is just so focused.
Mhm.
There's zero emotion. It's
Yeah.
all objectivity. Are there things that you're doing before surgery to try to get you into that mindset?
No, I was an OR tech, as we talked about when I was in college, and in Fort Smith, Arkansas. The first time I was in the OR, I fainted. I'm like, this is crazy. You're under lights and got scrubs on, gown, and it's hot, and Dr. Hawkins, who was the nicest guy in the world, handed me we were doing a hernia, so the incisions is this big, and you get to be a retractor and you pull on it, and I went out. Because it's weird. I mean, to take a knife and cut somebody open is, if you weren't in the hospital and did that, you'd be in jail. But we're allowed to do that in the operating room. It's kind of bizarre.
It's not natural, is it? Hold on, John, you're telling me you fainted in the OR in Arkansas, but you went on to serve in one of the biggest battles in American history
Yeah.
under
So,
immense pressure.
a week later, I mean, you become used to it, right? So a week later, we were doing an amputation, and it didn't bother me. But yeah, the emotions and the physical touch and the human emotions are really important. Um, but not when you're not necessarily when you're holding the knife in your hand and you're actually doing the operation, because you do need to be somewhat detached. Like
hmm So October 3rd, do you know how long you operated for?
I actually don't. I never calculated it, but I don't know, a day and a half or so.
Straight.
It's pretty much there.
What was the feeling that people had at base?
I think the feeling was we got to do everything we can. I mean, for these guys. That people go, well, that must have been really hard. And I said, yeah, but you've seen the movies and the books, which are fairly realistic. Um, Imagine those guys, right? So we had it better than they did.
Wow. And then what happens? So you operate for a day and a half. What happens next?
Well, at some point, you lay down to go sleep. We operated initially. Took me, the patients, back to the operating room again to wash out their wounds before they got on an aircraft and went up to Germany to Landstuhl. So a number of the patients had two operations, some of them just one. And then once we had taken care of all the casualties, then we laid down to rest. But not everybody got evacuated out. There were a lot of the minor wounded, still wounded, but not at risk of dying. It didn't go down the first aircraft, and so we had to look at their wounds and X-ray the wounds. Right, so you always find things that could be significant. One one patient sticks in my mind. He had a little wound right here, just a tiny little, like a little boo-boo, right? Like you put a Band-Aid
On the forehead.
on his forehead. Yeah. And he came up, and, after the dust had cleared and people had slept, got back up, ate, and went back to work. And he goes, hey, I got this little wound. And I talked to him, and he goes, I said, what happened? He goes, well, an RPG skipped across the front of the Jeep, and I felt something hit me in the forehead, and put his helmet down and drove on, right? Kept on fighting. I said, well, that sounds interesting. I'll do a little neurologic exam and everything's fine. I said, why don't you go get some plain films, get some x-rays, and let's take a look at it. Turns out he had a fragment in the middle of his brain. So a little small fragment in the middle of his brain. Well, that was pretty interesting. So we got a CAT scan, and the guy's totally normal neurologically, totally normal. And I called back to Jim Leash, a neurosurgeon buddy of mine in El Paso. And I said, hey, Jim, I got this guy with this fragment, in his brain. It was normal. And what should we do? And Jim's a good guy and good buddy. He goes, well, call in the regular evac and get him back to Germany. They'll take a look at him. Well, that was going to be a week. That didn't sound like a good idea. Have a guy sit around with a piece of metal in his brain. So we called in an airplane for him and got him out. And he ended up having an abscess and getting an operation on that. But you just don't know. So just the teaching there was just because a thing looks like, I mean, it's a tiny little thing, you know, just, but you guys got to x-ray them all. I mean, you have to really top to bottom. Not the kind of thing you do in the middle of a massive cow, but a day or two later, sort it out. There were
Yes.
a bunch of those. So
Yes, sir. That's so interesting that stands out, you know? I'm sure all of it's such a blur.
it's a lot of blur, but some of those lessons are really important. And so I told that story, to my younger colleagues who are seeing this kind of thing for the first time. In Iraq and Afghanistan, one of the major injuries was from IEDs and explosions, and they send fragments all over the place. So you'll see a guy with 100 holes, and you have to take each one of them separately and see what's underneath. Where did that little fragment go that's caused the 100 hole?
Wow. How many lives were lost tragically in that battle?
18.
18 American soldiers.
Yeah, 18 American soldiers. Yeah.
How many people do you operate on? Do you know?
I think we probably did about 40 operations.
Wow.
Yeah, between the three of us. Some off, some short, some long.
How old were you?
How old was I? Oh my goodness. Well, I was born in 59, right? So 33, 34.
34 years old doing 40 surgeries in Somalia.
The key thing there, Andrew, is I was a year and a half out of training, right? So it's not the age really, it's your age as a surgeon. I've been a surgeon for a year, right? Tony Canfield, 6 months out of training. He was a year behind me. And John Yahorchak was the same. He was older, but a year and a half, 2 years out of his orthopedic training. So we were all, young surgeons.
God bless you guys.
Good team. And the key is we knew each other from El Paso.
That's cool.
It's
Yeah.
totally by accident. But it was just, and I knew Tony was good and John was good and they could operate, we helped each other. So,
Man, when you're in sync like that, there's nothing better.
yeah, it was a good team. Good OR team. And one of the key things, and really one of the messages, is that the hospital had taken care of many local Somalis and UN forces. And so it allows the team to work together, right? The OR nurses and the OR techs and the anesthesiologist, and the logistics and the supplies. It wasn't, the first case didn't happen that morning, right? We've been doing cases.
Who is Michael Durant?
Mike Durant was a helicopter pilot with the 160th, which is the Special Operations Helicopter Unit. He's one of the guys, the guy that was captured and held captive as a prisoner of war by Mohammed Farahid's forces.
What do you remember about him getting home?
Yeah, so that was my trip home. Phil Volpe was our boss. He called me up. He goes, "Hey, I want you to be the escort for Michael Durant." I'm like, "Well, I don't want to do that." And he said, "Well, we're going to escort him all the way home." Yeah, a lot of publicity and people stuff. And the key point was I would go home and not come back, right? So that was pretty good. Yeah, so I was kind of the medical escort for Mike Durant, all up from Mogadishu up to Germany and then back home for camp.
Why didn't you want to do that?
It sounded like a PR nightmare.
I mean, he was a big deal, right? There was videos of him being held as a POW being released on global news.
Oh yeah, yeah. You just at some point you just want to fly underneath the radar a little bit, and
That's your MO, brother.
it was very interesting. It's I did a news conference, by the way, and with the UN backing and background and that kind of thing, and I was pretty nervous because I'd never done anything like that before. Subsequently, that'd be no problem. Like today, it'd be no problem. But back then, and the PR guy, public affairs guy, he recognized I was nervous, and he said, "Doc, calm down. It's okay." And I said, why is it okay? He goes, "Because you know more about this than anybody in the room." Okay. But don't use a bunch of doctor words, in the press conference. You're talking to a bunch of reporters.
That's a great story. Did you and Mike talk? Like, what do you even say to a guy who was just being held captive?
A little bit, but he was really surrounded by his, what you do with a prisoner of war is there's a whole little, plan, and, I was really there in case something went wrong, or some medical thing or whatever. I didn't know, Mike at that time, and, but the guys who really, um, talked to him a lot were his fellow aviators. So you surround him all the way home with familiar faces, and I wasn't a familiar face. So he's surrounded by familiar faces until he gets back home to his family.
Interesting. Did you have PTSD from it?
Number one, nobody comes home the same from an experience like that. I think so. I think, I have PTSD maybe a little bit too. I don't have nightmares or night sweats, but when talking at a medical conference or talking about specific injuries, then it's pretty emotional still. Nobody comes home the same. Everybody handles this differently. Uh, for me, I decided not to get out of the army and to work on stopping bleeding, right? And so I think channeling that energy, if you will, rather than in a negative way, hopefully in a positive way, has really been the way I have kind of dealt with those things that happened, which are bad. I mean, a lot of people died, and people died that today might not die because of some of the advances that the DoD and others have invested in.
Yeah.
They're on better resuscitation, better hemorrhage control, better body armor, better tactics, TTPs, techniques and procedures. Yeah. So it's been I think channeling that energy. You can either make a negative thing or a positive thing. Not always positive either, but it's energy.
Before October 1993, you were planning on moving to New Mexico.
Yeah,
A lay
little town.
surgeon in a town of 20,000 people.
Yeah, I'll be the fourth out of three surgeons. The fourth out of four surgeons.
You
Which
didn't
would be great. It would have been great. Doing everything, which is what general surgeons like to do. You like to do a little bit of everything. Hunting, fishing. Built had a plot of land that looked out over the was beautiful.
but you couldn't do that.
Not after that then. Not after that.
Why?
We had soldiers who bled to death after reaching the hospital. I had just finished my training. Felt pretty, comfortable doing lots of surgery, and we had soldiers bleed to death. So came home and I said, well, I need to read about this and research, which I had not written any papers, had not done any research. Didn't go to that kind of surgery training program. We went to kind of training program where you do a lot of surgery, but not a lot of research. So I started reading about hemorrhage control. And just as an example, what I found out is that the gauze dressings, we use gauze in the operating room on silk sutures to stop bleeding. And those had been around since this Egypt times of the Egyptians, if not the Sumerians, which is the civilization before the Egyptians. So you read medical history, and surgeons have been using gauze dressings to stop bleeding for 5 or 6,000 years. That's crazy. Given even in 93, we had pretty advanced technology. We had helicopters with cameras that watched the whole battlefield, right? You had incredible presence. We had telemedicine available in the hospital. It didn't work very well, but we had it in 1993. We had CAT scanners, I mean, we had lots of advanced
Night
technology.
vision goggles at this time?
Uh-huh.
Night vision goggles, right?
Night vision goggles. Yeah, they weren't great, but they were, better than being blind. We had ceramic body armor. I mean, we had advanced technology on the weapons side, and we had we had advanced technology on the medical side. But the way we stopped bleeding was with gauze dressing and silk sutures, which is 3 or 4,000 year old technology. And all you got to do is say, how do you stop bleeding? Okay, here's how you stop bleeding. Here's how you stop it pre-hospital, and here's how you stop it in the hospital. Well, we surround soldiers with all this new technology. We should do better than that. So I thought that would take 3 or 4 years, and here we are still today. I was at a blood meeting earlier this week in San Antonio, Texas, talking about blood, stopping bleeding.
You've dedicated your life to stopping bleeding.
Yeah.
What have you learned about it?
We have better dressings now. So soldiers, when they go to the field, carry a better dressing. And we were able to implement that early in the Iraq War, and tourniquets. We don't really give the clear fluid anymore that you'll see on TV, the crystalloid. We give blood products, both pre-hospital and in the hospital.
What is that?
Again,
Blood products.
yeah, blood. Yeah, blood. So if you bleed blood, we should give you blood, right? It sounds very simple.
Were they not doing that before?
They were not doing that. And where are you at right now, Andrew? What city?
I'm in Iowa, my hometown. I
Yeah,
grew up.
Iowa. By the way, Iowa has no pre-hospital blood. It is one of the states. No pre-hospital blood. If you come to North Carolina, Texas, or Florida, or many other states in the union, and if you're injured, you'll get pre-hospital blood. Iowa is one of the ones on the list that doesn't. So drive very carefully, right? Drive
Okay,
carefully.
so what does that mean for me? Like, why do I care about that?
So you'll have a higher risk of dying because you don't, if you're in hemorrhagic shock in Iowa than you would in Texas.
Give me an example of that. It's like me, I get in a car crash, glass gets in my leg,
Yeah.
I'm
So you get in a
bleeding.
car crash, get your seatbelt on, and it's a bad crash, and you have a splenic injury. You have a rib fracture on the left side, and it punctures your spleen. Very common.
Yes, sir.
And you go into shock, right? Hemorrhagic shock. And if you don't, if we give you crystalloid, the clear fluid, that's on 98% of the ground ambulances in the United States, to include Iowa, it increases death. If you're in one of the places that has pre-hospital blood available, it lowers your risk of death absolutely by 10%, and which is from 33 to 23%, which is a relative 30% improvement in survival.
Wow.
Nothing that does that.
Just by having hot blood in the ambulances?
Yes.
Why aren't they carrying blood right now?
There's tradition and expense.
Well, that's dumb.
It is dumb. It's really done. And so today, our biggest project that I'm involved with, a bunch of little projects and little things going on, is really to spread pre-hospital blood on every eligible ambulance in the United States. We've launched a pretty big program on that. You can read about it in our website, pre-hospital blood transfusion. And yeah, I mean, we're going to raise some money. We're going to get Congress to put money into the CMS. So for Medicare, so the insurance companies will pay for blood. There's no research needed. The research is done. We worked with the suppliers of blood. We know how to put it on ambulances, and you got to keep it cold, and you got to warm it up, and that kind of thing. We know how to do that. But yeah, we just got to implement this across the United States, and this comes from the military. So we studied this in Iraq and Afghanistan. Massive improvement in survival of soldiers who give blood pre-hospital, pre-OR, and so we want to do the same thing in the civilian world.
Where is it a bigger deal, do you think? Where is it needed more? Civilians or in military?
Yeah. So, well, I have a bias towards the military, obviously. Right now, there's not a big war going on. Even in Iraq and Afghanistan, a little bit less than 8,000 soldiers died. Military personnel, soldiers, airmen, Marines, died in Iraq and Afghanistan in 20 years. During that time, almost 1.5 million civilians died. So the scale of death, potentially preventable death in the civilian world, is much greater.
1.5 million deaths total from everything: cancer, heart attack.
No, bleeding. Yeah, bleeding. Yeah, cancer and heart disease is another thing. So in the United States, in the civilians, death and trauma is the leading cause of death from age 1 to 47 now. As you get older, like me, then cancer and heart disease kicks in. But from your age, it's trauma, and bleeding is the preventable cause.
Stop it. Between ages 1 and 47,
Yeah.
the number one leading cause of death is trauma.
Correct.
That's insane.
And it's been that way for 40 years. It's on the CDC website.
Give me the top 3 to 5 examples of trauma.
Well, you fall, right? You fall off a ladder and break something, break ribs. You have obviously gunshot wounds and stab wounds, what people think about. Car crashes are much more common. Car crashes, falls, and then gunshots and stab wounds in the United States.
I can't wait till we have driverless cars.
So they're much safer. They're much safer. I have an F-150 electric truck, F-150 Lightning, and yesterday I drove from San Antonio to Houston, 180 miles, and my truck drove itself most of the way.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah, nice and much safer.
I get in these Waymos and I'm like, yes, I'm home. For our listener, do a fun game. Bring up the word Waymo in an Uber sometime and see how horrible your ride gets.
Yeah, yeah, I'll do that.
But it's right. I mean, you have these people like stepping into weapons every day as cars. Not a lot freaks me out, but that's one of them.
Yeah,
So you're saying 1.5 million lives lost over 20 years from
yeah,
trauma.
yeah,
And we could have decreased that by like 30%. We could have maybe saved 500,000 lives
yeah.
if we would have had pre-hospital blood.
So we estimate about 20,000 lives a year. It's an estimate. Could be saved. And when we talk to the NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Agency, NHTSA, which is part of the Department of Transportation, when they it's the equivalent of putting seatbelts on. And the lives saved went back in the 60s and 70s when seatbelts, were not used, and then they were. Nothing approaches the impact of pre-hospital blood.
Wait, say that again. Say that in its entirety.
Yeah, so the potential lives saved by putting pre-hospital blood is probably in the order of about 20,000 per year. Now, that's with trauma and also the other causes of hemorrhagic shock, which are postpartum hemorrhage. After having a baby, percentage of women bleed. Older folks that bleed from it's called GI bleeding, gastrointestinal bleeding from their bowels. Another big reason is the dialysis patients that have shunts that they put the needle in; those flow out. I mean, so there's many reasons to have bleeding. Most bleeding does not result in shock, but when you do, you have a very high mortality, high death rate. And the sooner you get blood, the better off you'll be. It's not a slogan. Every minute does count. We've measured it. Every minute counts. Every minute of delay of blood increases death.
John, what the hell are we waiting for? How do we get this blood out?
We got to get the insurance companies to reimburse the EMS agencies for the blood that they transfuse. That's the key.
And they're only going to do that if there's a return to them. Are you able to prove a return to them? It's sad.
So
That's
the
the case,
return on
right?
investment, right, to use a business phrase. In the medical world, it's a little bit different, right? So if we save the life, because it's largely young people that have this problem, then we get them back to paying taxes. And so, it's not in it's the overall reimbursement to society. Really. It's called,
It is.
it's not to the insurance company.
That's the problem though, right? Is like the insurance company's like, well, actually, that's just making them more expensive to me because now we're keeping them around and before they were dying.
That's
It's
correct.
morbid, but it's true.
Except if they pay it in their yearly,
The
premium
premium.
insurance company. It's the economics become once you start putting numbers next to lives saved, it's a very interesting calculation. But the key is that these are largely young people who will go back to paying taxes and paying their insurance premium.
So what is the insurance saying about it right now? Have you gotten any reimbursement yet?
We are it's taken a while. COVID kind of threw us for a loop a little bit. Recovering from that, we've established a 501c3. We're raising money. We're going to go to DC in April of next year. In the meantime, actually, I'll be in Iowa next month.
For what?
Yeah, talking to one of your prospective congressmen. Yeah.
Oh, you're coming to Iowa. When did you realize you were capable of handling high pressure environments?
Things develop over time, right? So like I said, first time I was in the OR, I fainted. You go through training. I mean, our surgical training at that, back in the day, we worked 100, 110, 120 hours a week. And so you get very used to kind of function. And, you're kind of thrown into the lion's den. I mean, it's a sink or swim kind of thing. It's less so now, I would say, probably better for patients, but certainly was back then. And really, you don't. People gravitate towards different kind of surgery. I kind of gravitated, if you will, towards this kind of surgery. Others gravitate I would, towards endocrine surgery, where you take out the thyroid. I mean, you make incisions like this, and spend a couple hours, dissecting out one little area of the body. I mean, I like doing those operations, but I also like making big incisions on people with minimal information and stopping big bleeding. It's becomes a little bit of it becomes intoxicating, to be frank,
Mhm.
and it's the equivalent of the soldiers, going out in battle. You'll hear it all the time. That they really like. It's intoxicating.
So if you were going to give me one piece of advice, I love putting myself in stressful environments, not anything to what you've done, but I like to going to the Himalayas and Nepal, and I like being in Muay Thai, and I love being in a boardroom where I'm pitching and
Yeah.
millions of dollars are on the line. What are one or two things you would say to me to remain focused and calm in those situations?
Number one, prepare. Right. So you prepare, right, which I'm sure you do. I still read books before doing operations, review the anatomy, and review the charts. I mean, so you prepare.
Hmm.
What most surgeons do is when we're out there at the sink washing our hands, we're thinking about the operation. I think having what we call in the military a bump plan. So you have plan A, plan B, plan C. If this happens, then this, right? So 3 plans. I'm sure when you're hiking the Himalayas, you have different routes. I've never done that, but you have some plan. And the same thing when you're doing a pitch. If you get some crazy question, you always have alternatives that you can respond to. Uh, that way, it's very rare to be in the operating room or someplace and not be able to get yourself out of a problem if you have it. You're reviewed, prepared, and have options. And then there's just different personalities that thrive in that. So when I was doing it full time, you take your pulse, and the worse the patient was, the slower my pulse would get. In those situations when patients are really sick, the leader of the team's got to be under control and not losing a shit, right? Because then the whole thing falls apart.
Focus on calming yourself down.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a mental exercise. Control your breathing, control your heart rate, control your blood pressure, and that allows you to think clearly.
Wow. That's great advice. How are you currently spending your time? If I looked at a pie chart.
So I tell people I'm in phase 3. Phase 1 was pretty hardcore Army stuff. Phase 2, pretty hardcore civilian academia, running a division, going to committee meetings, HR, writing grants, writing papers, that kind of thing at a really busy trauma center here in Houston. Phase 3, I am now on, I don't know, 4 or 5 boards. I started a small IT company that just exited, and I do consulting around the world. I'm consulting with a small group out of Spain, um, I'm working with a kind of a worldwide remote austere surgical group of guys who's headquartered out Australia with a U.S. headquarters in San Antonio and D.C. And then I work clinically 3 or 4 days a month down in Birmingham, Alabama. So where I'm pretty proud to say I have no committees, no HR reports, and I have no administrative responsibilities. So,
Just surgery?
just doctor stuff. I help them with their research program. I round the ICU. I operate, teach the residents and fellows. Um, I'm the old guy who walks around and gives advice.
Well, you're well positioned to do so.
And then I spend a lot of time out the ranch, which is where I'll be tomorrow. Right?
Yep.
Yep.
Well earned. In that pie chart, you forgot to mention Ukraine.
Yeah. So Ukraine, which is part of this austere surgical company that I work with. Um, so in April, let's see, in May of 22, I got a call from a buddy of mine who was in Ukraine, U.S. ex-military, and he said, "Hey, will you send me your slides and your talk on resuscitation with blood products?" And I said, "Sure." And the next day, he called back and said, "Why don't you come over here?" And I'm like, "Well, Lona, let me ask my wife." And she said yes. And
That's a good wife.
yeah, it's a good wife. She's a good Army wife. We had decided to say no. I got asked when I got out of the Army in 2008. Said we had little kids and busy doing that stuff, and so it was no during that time.
Very fair.
Very
It's your
fair.
right to say that.
But you move forward from 2008 and 9 to 2022, and the kids were almost graduated college, and everybody's kind of set. Uh, the joke is, I could get injured or die and it'd be okay, right? So go to Ukraine and do your thing. Yeah, so I've now been back to Ukraine 4 or 5 times. We had a call this morning with the Ukrainians actually, and initially was helping with surgery, doing surgery um, in Western Ukraine, not Eastern. But the casualty flow comes back, and a lot of the civilians in Western Ukraine are not taking care of combat casualties. And it's a different war, but war injuries are largely the same. And help them with that. And now it's as they have progressed. It's more infectious disease and working with really bad bacteria that get resistant to bacteria and kind of help them with that. And plus, we have a DoD grant where we bring Ukrainians out to Warsaw every other month, and lessons they're now teaching us, U.S., NATO, UK folks, who will sit in a small room and have focused seminars on special subjects, blood, tourniquets, evacuation, etc. And they're teaching us, about drones. The drone warfare has changed everything on the battlefield, and we're learning from the Ukrainians how they're fighting the Russian terrorists.
What's the environment like when you're over there?
So like I said, I don't go to the front lines. And so I've been to Kyiv and Lviv, which are beautiful Eastern European towns. I mean, if you've been to Eastern Europe, they're beautiful Eastern European cities. Great food, great people, fighting on their homeland, fighting for their life.
Hmm. So you don't feel in danger when you're there.
They're probably not any more than going to a bad part of town. You hear the sirens go off from the rockets and missiles coming in, but then you just go into the basement or into the bomb shelter. I have never been one to be petrified. It doesn't do any good, right? It doesn't change anything. Yeah, I mean, nor am I stupid. I don't want to go be into the trenches in the far east of Ukraine. I'm not going to do. It's been offered, and I decline that opportunity.
So you've served as one of 3 trauma surgeons in Black Hawk Down. You've dedicated the latter part of your career to getting pre-hospital blood to help, the millions of people that are losing their lives to trauma. You've done a lot of service. Our world idolizes musicians, actors, actresses, all these people. Does that ever bother you that more glory goes to them than to your colleagues?
What bothers me is the Hall of Fame baseball players who strike out 2/3 of the time. If you have a 350 batting average, you're in the Hall of Fame. If you were a 350 batting average surgeon, you'd be fired. To me, I don't quite understand. I do understand. I played baseball and basketball, played all sorts of sports. Um, that kind of thinking can make you crazy. When we sit around and drink beers, at the surgery table at meetings, you kind of talk about that kind of thing, but it's just the way it is.
You're right, though. You have to be so on. You can't go out and party the night before work. The stakes are way too high.
Well, you can, but you don't do good surgery if you do that. There's no question about that. And so, yeah, the expectation is that you're perfect, which of course we're not. Um, Everybody has made mistakes in the operating room, and you live with that. But yeah, you minimize those mistakes, and try to be as good as you can be.
How do you bounce back from that? Like, I'm sure you can think of a time that you screwed up.
Oh yeah,
How do you not let that compound?
I think that's part of there are surgeons who don't recover from that, and that's part of the mental. You just have to. Everybody makes mistakes in their life, right? You've made mistakes in your life. I've made mistakes in.
100%.
You either quit surgery, or you do a different kind of surgery, or you learn from it and study it, prepare, and resolve never to make that mistake again. We have this thing called M&M, Morbidity and Mortality Conference. And in academic surgery programs, you have weekly M&M, and you close the door, and this is where you get up and say, I made this mistake. This is what I did. I, used that pronoun, I. I didn't do this anastomosis right because I didn't use the right suture, or I put the suture in wrong, and I've learned from that, and I won't do that again. It's a very closed door session. It's meant to be very honest and transparent. And the beautiful, I love M&M because I can learn from other people's mistakes and not have to make them, right, for the benefit of my patient.
That's a beautiful practice. Is that widely accepted and utilized?
So in surgery, it is. Yeah, in surgery, it is. I would say in other medical specialties, it's probably less so.
They should do that in everything. All businesses should do that.
All businesses should do that. It is really a good. The airline industry is what kind of led this way. Um, with pilots and publishing the error, pilot error, mechanical error, that kind of thing, so that other pilots can learn and not make the same mistakes. But you
Yeah.
can only do that with transparency and non-attribution. Right. So if you say I made this mistake, then please don't fire me. Right. Unless you make it over and over and over again, and then I should.
You've seen more death than most people will or have. What wisdom would you want to share with the world because of that? What have you learned?
I don't take night call or weekend call anymore. I got tired of people dying. It is not healthy. It becomes an emotional toll. What I always felt a responsibility to do is go talk to the family afterwards and hold their hands and cry with them and shed tears and give them hugs. It's all you can do, right? And that takes a lot out of a person year after year after year. I think the key thing is what we were talking about earlier. And I tell the young surgeons this: say, look, you got to step away and allow those human feelings to come out. That's okay. It's good to share them with the family. They see you as a person as well, and they need that. I think you be brutally honest with people, right? Don't hide anything. Be respectful of their emotions when you're being brutally honest, right? So there's a balance there and how you communicate that. Um, but at the same time, you got to take care of yourself.
What's something you think the public gets wrong about trauma surgeons?
So they confuse us with emergency medicine doctors all the time, right? So they think, oh, you work only in the ER. I said, no, no, no. I work pre-hospital in the ED, in the emergency department, in the operating room, in the ICU, and in the floor. I get to work all the way through. And that's a little bit different than around the world. Um, the TV shows, so all the surgery happening in the emergency room, and everybody goes home. They all live. That's not the way it works. Yeah, it's all right.
Yeah, what percentage of patients do you think passing through trauma surgery live and die?
96% live.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, yeah. If you break your rib or break your, femur, the main bone in your leg, then you're probably not going to die. You have a brain injury, you break open your spleen or your liver, and those patients are the ones who don't do well. But yeah, only about 4%, 3 or 4% die that come from
Yeah.
trauma. A level 1 trauma.
Yeah. Well, everything you've been through and the fact that you're spending so much of your time and energy in the phase 3 of your career on getting pre-hospital blood shows all of us just how important it is. What are things that we can do to help support that mission?
So, number 1, call your local EMS guy. Like whoever is the ambulance for your little area where you live, call them and ask them if they have pre-hospital blood. If they don't, why? And how can you help them? The second call is to your congressman and senator. Say, look, you need to put money into Medicare so that they could pay for blood. That's the message right now. So it's a two-pronged thing, right? If your medics have blood, they're not getting reimbursed for it. Their insurance companies are not paying it. And so we're going to start with the federal insurance programs, and the privates will follow along.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That'll happen. We need that to happen with a groundswell.
It's a huge honor for me, John. Seriously, man. I know you don't, your natural inclination is to not come on and to talk about yourself or talk about what you've done. I had to grip pretty hard to get you on, I think. So
Yeah, the thing is, people. I mean, you want to have like a guy, right, to talk to. But in reality, if you look at everything we've done, it's been these huge teams, huge teams. Jill's son Dean who's a PhD. Nobody knows Jill. Mike Dubik, who's dead now, another PhD. Charlie Wade, who's not in Hawaii now. He's in his early 70s. He's probably surfing in Hawaii. But those guys are real physiologists, and they taught me physiology. And we talked about resuscitation from a physiology point of view. And we did animal studies, and then we did human studies. And we wouldn't be talking about resuscitation in the way we are if it hadn't been for them. And nobody will let you guys will, nobody will know them.
Well, I'm glad that we're honoring their legacy here.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks so much to your character to put the shine on them. You've accomplished so much yourself. Your legacy is huge. It's going to live on for generations to come. And here you are yet putting shine on your teammates, and other people. That says a lot about you.
Yeah. Nobody does anything by themselves, right?
That's true.
Nobody.
Yeah, we're standing on the shoulders of giants.
Everybody has teams that have helped.
Yeah. Amen. John, thank you for doing this. It's a huge honor for me, and thank you for your service and everything you've done for our country.
I will see you on the 20th.
Sioux City, Iowa. Who knew? That's it. Thank you so much for tuning in to Permission to Shine, the podcast dedicated to sharing the most humble, inspiring stories that I know you will love. Again, this is Andrew Nemani. I appreciate you tuning in. As always, please reach out. Please follow on Instagram, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, Spotify, Apple. Leave us your thoughts. Let us know who you want as a future guest or what's your takeaways from this conversation. We'll talk to you soon. Have a great, great week.